Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we are specifically going to be talking about Andrew Yang and load-bearing fictions. Load-bearing fictions, all right? Now, what is a load-bearing fiction, all right? So let's give credit where credit is due. Load-bearing fiction is a load-bearing fiction. One, the term was used by, I heard it from Eric Weinstein. Eric Weinstein is a capable intellectual, right? And he has his own podcast called The Portal. And he was interviewing an economist by the name of Timur Kuran. And they were talking about on this podcast about preference falsification. That's why preference falsification is the reason Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton, right? Because nobody saw it coming. So Eric Weinstein used this term in his podcast, and he said a load-bearing fiction. And I was like, load-bearing fiction, mic drop, boom. That is a major term. Like, there's so much truth in that term, right? Like, load-bearing fiction. I love this term. And what I want to talk about today is what are the load-bearing fictions that are in place during Andrew Yang's 2020 U.S. presidential primary Democrat candidacy, during the race, right? There are a number of load-bearing fictions that specifically Andrew Yang has to deal with as he's running, right? And these are very real, and I think it's important that Andrew Yang is aware of them, and I think it's important that we as political wonks are aware of these. So let's talk about exactly what so I talked about who said load-bearing fiction. Also, a big thank you. I have a subscriber by the name of Caleb S. I'm not sure. I don't like to use people's last name if they don't want. I don't want to out. I don't want to call him out if he doesn't want to be called out. But Caleb S. Pointed me to this. As one of my subscribers. It's really hugely helpful to me if you're listening to somebody who's a really great source for you to learn more about politics, to learn more about the world. Please point me to them in the comments. It's incredibly helpful. So one of my subscribers, Caleb S., pointed me toward this, and it was really, really helpful. Thank you very much, Caleb. And so it was really, it was special, and basically when I heard this term, it was just like, it really rang in my head, right? So what is a load-bearing fiction? A load-bearing fiction is a belief that is 100% wrong, right? But the fiction, the people's desire to believe the fiction is so incredibly high that it bears weight, right? It actually makes it so that parts of America work better, and that people are comforted by it, and actually other institutions and other entire other elements of Americana rest on this fiction, right? And it's such a great term, and one of the reasons why why there are load-bearing fictions, and I think this is important for us to understand, is people desperately want to be lied to. There's certain things that they're so bound up in believing, right? And let me say for very, very quickly that I probably have my own load-bearing fictions, right? I think people have their own load-bearing fictions, and as a nation, we definitely have load-bearing fictions, and communities have load-bearing fictions, right? And I think, but the reality is, we are humans, we are self-aware, right? And we want to identify our own personal load-bearing fictions, and our community's load-bearing fictions, and our nation's load-bearing fictions, and deal with them, right? It's painful, but I think it's important, right? We should really try not to, we should stop putting weight on fictions, right? And so I really think it's important to acknowledge this and move forward, right? So let's start talking about some load-bearing fictions that are in play during Andrew Yang's 2020 U.S. presidential primary Democrat race, right? So what are they, and why is it important that we're aware of them, right? So let's dig into it. First and foremost, actually I don't know if it's the biggest one, but it's definitely important, is the load-bearing fiction that polls matter. Boy, do they not matter. They are so, if we learned nothing from 2016, it is that polls do not matter, right? they are a point in time. They're so incredibly flawed, and their outcomes are either benign or incredibly dangerous. Look how dangerous the polling turned out to be from 2016, and the media has learned nothing from 2016, right? Like, we see all these polls saying, oh, the entire top 4 candidates, Harris, Warren, Biden, and Sanders, they'll all beat Trump by 10 or 20 points. Like, just these ludicrous load-bearing fictions. Polls don't matter, right? And the reason why is preference falsification. People lie, they avoid, and polls are not effective. Like, that is super, super clear. Another load-bearing fiction that we have in America is outrage equals momentum, right? This is a big one, right? So, like, a really good example of this is we have this one specific issue in America. It comes up every 2-3 weeks. There's a terrible event, and people are upset. And they run over to Twitter and they're like, this situation has got to change. Like, we've got to, change these fundamental laws of our nation and get rid of these certain devices within our country. It's got to change, right? Like, and the reality is there's so much outrage, right? And people think that's going to turn into momentum. The reason it doesn't turn into momentum is history, right? There's still people in America who understand history. And I can give you the reason that, that basically the reason we keep certain devices in America: no kings, no kings, no kings. There will never be another king in America, and there is, this is a huge part of our culture, and it proves that we have a load-bearing fiction where outrage equals momentum. It doesn't, right? Like, the reality is there's still people in America who understand history and are saying we will never ever have a king, right? We're not Denmark, right? Denmark doesn't have a king right now. It has a queen, but Denmark has the ability to have a queen because they're still a monarchy, right? And America's like, no monarchs, no king, no king, right? And that's it. Like, that's 2 words will tell you exactly why, outrage does not actually equal momentum, right? So these are 2 very specific load-bearing fictions that are there. The other thing, next one, the masses do not care about climate change, right? Basically, it's a load-bearing fiction. Like, the media comes in there like, we're all concerned about climate change. No. A lot of people are not concerned about climate change. And the reason why is not because they don't care, right? Actually, yeah, it is because they don't care. The reason why the masses are not fearful about climate change is tech, right? Like, tech has solved virtually every problem human beings have ever had. It has never failed to not only take huge problems we have and make them trivial, right? But the reality is, like, many times, tech solves problems so dramatically that it gets to the point where, like, the problems aren't even remembered, right? Like, a good example is cell phones, right? Like, cell phones are so incredibly powerful that they have gotten rid of, like, dozens and dozens of problems, right? I'm a huge fan of Nancy. It sounds weird. I like the old Nancy Drew mystery books, and I've read quite a few, right? And I'm a really big fan of the Nancy Drew movie. I'm the only person on the planet who really liked that movie, right? But I really liked it, and it was really good, and it was fun. And I like this idea of a teen sleuth, right, who solves mysteries, right? Like, virtually everything in classic Nancy Drew mystery novels is solved with a cell phone call. It's like, and just so you're aware, like, look at any movie, like any horror movie, any drama movie, the first thing you do is you have to get rid of a cell phone because it solves 50 problems, right? And so the reason why people aren't, fearful about climate change is they're like, tech's going to take care of this. Tech is absolutely going to take care of this. It's a huge thing, right? And so, these are overall, at the macro level, people really aren't that fearful of climate change because they really believe in their hearts that it is absolutely going to get fixed by technology, right? So These are some of the load-bearing fictions that are in place as Andrew Yang continues his primary run, right? And it's really important. Like it's a really critically important aspect for him to understand that these are load-bearing fictions. These are fictions that Americans believe in their deepest of hearts that these things are true, right? But the reality is they really aren't problems for America. And understanding how Americans are responding to these perceived problems and how they're clutching these load-bearing fictions is very, very important for Andrew Yang, because it allows him to speak, right? To speak to the truth, or to understand what the comfort is needed from the load-bearing fiction. And let's be clear, I'm not saying that Andrew Yang should expose these load-bearing fictions, right? I'm saying that he needs to understand them so he knows how to proceed and how to interact with the media, how to interact with the public at large, right? The message that he wants to give it across the media. The other thing is even to the smallest factors, like how does he deal with people who are actually in front of him, like actual human beings, who he's shaking hands with. So all these are load-bearing fictions that are in place. I really think Andrew Yang should be hyper aware of them. We as political wonks need to be hyper aware of them. And we need to really noodle about, what are our own personal load-bearing fictions? What are the load-bearing fictions of the communities that we belong to? What are the load-bearing fictions of the communities we lead, right? And what do we do with it, right? Do we snatch that comfort away from people? Or do we, or do we do it slowly over time? How do we manage load-bearing fictions? I think it's Eric Weinstein, brilliant saying. I love this saying, load-bearing fiction. It's really, it's a great description of our modern lives and what we deal with as modern people. Truly, truly transformative piece of language, right? And language is a tool, right? Mos Def said, "My speech is a hammer, bang the world into shape." Amen, brother. Right? I love this term. Thank you very much for letting me share these ideas with you today. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.